This recording begins at line 2200. Beowulf has returned home from Denmark. His king Hygelac gave him some gifts. He gave him land, 7,000 hides of land, a hall and throne, and a sword. And now in line 2200, that begins with "a lot was to happen," we are going to jump forward in time in the book. A lot was to happen in later days. In the fury of battle, Hygelac fell, and the shelter of Heardred's shield proved useless against the fierce aggression of the Shieldfings. Ruthless swordsmen, seasoned campaigners, they came against him and his conquering nation, and with cruel force cut him down, so that afterwards the wide kingdom reverted to Beowulf. The book had already alluded to us that Hygelac was going to die in battle, and we see that confirmed here. Hygelac dies in battle, and then the book goes forward to where Beowulf eventually becomes king of the Geats. He, speaking of Beowulf, ruled it well for 50 winters. 50 years. He rules as king for 50 years. So now Beowulf is, let's say, 70, 80 years old at this point. And he must be a good king because he's ruled for 50 years. We had another king in the story who ruled for 50 years as well, Hrothgar. Okay, Hrothgar, king of the Danes, was also king for 50 years. Beowulf is king of the Geats for 50 years. He ruled it well for 50 winters, grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark. A dragon on the prowl from the steep vaults of a stone-roofed barrow where he guarded a hoard. There was a hidden passage unknown to men, but someone managed to enter by it and interfere with the heathen trove. He had handled and removed a gem-studded goblet. It gained him nothing, though with a thief's wiles he had outwitted the sleeping dragon that drove him into rage, as the people of that country would soon discover. We have a new monster here, and that is a dragon. Our last two monsters were over in Denmark, Grendel and Grendel's mom, and now we have a new monster in Gateland. We have this dragon. He's never been a problem before, but a thief goes down into the dragon's lair and steals a goblet, okay, a really nice cup from him. And this awakens the dragon and makes him angry. If you've ever seen any movie with dragons, How to Train Your Dragon, Lord of the Rings, the list goes on and on with dragons, right? They love their treasure. They hoard their treasure. They don't want anyone touching it. And now a piece of this dragon's treasure has gone missing. The intruder who broached the dragon's treasure and moved him to wrath had never meant to. It was desperation on the part of a slave fleeing the heavy hand of some master, guilt-ridden and on the run, going to ground. No one even knew that this dragon's treasure existed until one day when a slave is running away from his abusive master, and he goes to hide in this little crevice in this mountainside and ends up finding this dragon's treasure underground. But he soon began to shake with terror. In shock, the wretch panicked and ran away with the precious metalwork. If your version has dots, like mine does on the page, that just means that the manuscript was damaged, and so the translator here, Seamus Heaney, he's trying to piece together the broken parts of the manuscript. There were many other heirlooms heaped inside the earth house, because so long ago, with deliberate care, somebody now forgotten had buried the riches of a high-born race in this ancient cache. Death had come and taken them all in times gone by, and the only one left to tell their tale, the last of their line, could look forward to nothing but the same fate for himself. He foresaw that his joy in the treasure would be brief. What we have here is a lazy dragon. He did not go all around the land picking and choosing pieces for his treasure. No, he found this treasure already established. There was this ancient group of people who were going extinct. And so before the last one died, he went and he hid all their treasure in this cave. Years later, the dragon finds it, claims it as his own. We have a lazy dragon here. We are going to skip the next paragraph and begin with "Then an old harrower." That an old harrower of the dark happened to find the hoard open, the burning one who hunts out barrows, the slick-skinned dragon threatening the night sky with streamers of fire. People on the farms are in dread of him. He is driven to hunt out hoards underground, to guard heathen gold through age-long vigils, though to little avail. For 3 centuries, the scourge of the people had stood guard on that stoutly protected underground treasury, until the intruder unleashed its fury. He hurried to his lord with the gold-plated cup and made his plea to be reinstated. Then the vault was rifled, the ring hoard robbed, and the wretched man had his request granted. His master gazed on that find from the past for the first time. So this dragon has been guarding this treasure for 300 years. No one has disturbed him. And then along comes this thief and steals a goblet out of the treasure. And this sets the dragon off. When the dragon awoke, trouble flared again. He rippled down the rock, writhing with anger when he saw the footprints of the prowler who had stolen too close to his dreaming head. So may a man not marked by fate easily escape exile and woe by the grace of God. The hoard guardian scorched the ground as he scoured and hunted for the trespasser who had troubled his sleep. Hot and savage, he kept circling and circling the outside of the mound. No man appeared in that desert waste, but he worked himself up by imagining battle. Then back in he'd go in search of the cup, only to discover signs that someone had stumbled upon the golden treasures. So the guardian of the mound, the hoard watcher, waited for the gloaming with fearsome patience. His pent-up fury at the loss of the vessel made him long to hit back and lash out in flames. Then, to his delight, the day waned, and he could wait no longer behind the wall, but hurtled forth in a fiery blaze. The first to suffer were the people on the land, but before long it was their treasure giver who had come to grief. So this dragon, he's wanting to get back at all of the people, just everywhere, for stealing his treasure, right? This one goblet. He is upset about this. And this dragon is a fire-breathing dragon. So he starts setting blaze to all the land, just setting things on fire all over the place. Buildings, land, etc. The dragon began to belch out flames and burn bright homesteads. There was a hot glow that scared everyone, for the vile skywinger would leave nothing alive in his wake. Everywhere the havoc he wrought was in evidence. Far and near, the Gate Nation bore the brunt of his brutal assaults and virulent hate. Then back to the hoard he would dart before daybreak to hide in his den. He had swinged the land, swathed it in flame, in fire and burning, and now he felt secure in the vaults of his barrow, but his trust was unavailing. Then Beowulf was given bad news, a hard truth. His own home, the best of buildings, had been burnt to a cinder, the throne room of the gates. Okay, so Beowulf's home burns to the ground. How do you think he's going to feel about that? He's going to want to go after this dragon. It threw the hero into deep anguish and darkened his mood. The wise man thought he must have thwarted ancient ordinance of the eternal Lord, broken his commandment. His mind was in turmoil. Unaccustomed anxiety and gloom confused his brain. The fire dragon had razed the coastal region and reduced forts and earthworks to dust and ashes. So the war king planned and plotted his revenge. The warrior's protector, prince of the hall troop, ordered a marvelous all-iron shield from his smithy works. He well knew that linden boards would let him down and timber burn. After many trials, he was destined to face the end of his days in this mortal world, as was the dragon, for all his long leasehold on the treasure. Beowulf, he's getting ready to fight this dragon. Not smart, because again, he's 70 to 80 years old, so he should not be fighting any dragon. But he's getting ready to fight this dragon, so he has ordered an iron shield, because a wood shield's not going to do anything against a fire-breathing dragon. Yet the Prince of the Rings was too proud to line up with a large army against the sky plague. He had scant regard for the dragon as a threat, no dread at all of its courage or strength, for he had kept going often in the past, through perils and ordeals of every sort, after he had purged Hrothgar's hall, triumphed in Heorot and beaten Grendel. He outgrappled the monster and his evil kin. Here we have kind of a warning. Beowulf, he's planning on fighting this dragon even though he is an old man. And it tells us there at the beginning of this stanza, yet the Prince of the Ringdanes was too proud to line up with a large army. This lets us know he is planning on fighting this dragon alone. And it brings up this issue of pride, and we've talked about pride before, specifically the term hubris, Hubris, which means extreme pride, the type of pride that leads to one's downfall. All the great tragic heroes that led to their downfall. We've had this warning from Hrothgar to Beowulf in past readings. Beware of your pride that can lead to one's downfall. And now we're finding out here that he is too proud to fight this dragon with help. He is going at it alone as an old man. This is not going to end well for him. Here in this next stanza, the book is going to have a flashback without warning us at all that it's having a flashback. One of his cruelest hand-to-hand encounters had happened when Hygelac, king of the Gates, was killed in Friesland. The people's friend and lord, Hrethel's son, slaked a sword's blade thirst for blood, but Beowulf's prodigious gifts as a swimmer guaranteed his safety. He arrived at the shore, shouldering 30 battle dresses, the booty he had won. There was little for the Hetweir to be happy about, as they shielded their faces and fighting on the ground began in earnest. With Beowulf against them, few could hope to return home. We had already been told in the past that Hygelac was eventually going to die in battle, and this is just the paragraph here that tells us how that happened. When he died in battle, Beowulf was able to escape with his life, and he took these 30 battle dresses with him, kind of like these spoils of war. And yes, we've seen the number 30 before with how many people Grendel killed that first night. And then Beowulf has the strength of 30 men in each arm. So carrying 30 battle dresses is not that big of a deal to him. 30 seems like it was a significant number to their society, but exactly why or how, we're not sure. But this is the third time we've seen this number repeat in this book. Across the wide sea, desolate and alone, the son of Ecgtheow swam back to his people. There Hygd offered him throne and authority as lord of the ring-hoard. With Hygelac dead, she had no belief in her son's ability to defend their homeland against foreign invaders. When Hygelac dies, his wife Hygd offers Beowulf the throne because her son is too young at that time, she feels like, to become the king. Yet there was no way the weakened nation could get Beowulf to give in and agree to be elevated over Heardred as his lord or to undertake the office of kingship. But he did provide support for the prince, honored and minded him until he matured as the ruler of Gateland. So Heardred is the name of Hygelac and Hygd's son. Beowulf is offered the throne and he says, no, I don't want it. Heardred should be the king, but I'll serve as his advisor. I'll help him along since he is such a young boy. Then over sea roads, exiles arrived, sons of Othere. They had rebelled against the best of all the sea kings in Sweden, the one who held sway in the Scilfing nation, the renowned prince, lord of the mead hall. That marked the end for Hygelac's son. His hospitality was mortally rewarded with wounds from a sword. Heardred lay slaughtered, and Onelia returned to the land of Sweden, leaving Beowulf to ascend the throne to sit in majesty and rule over the gates. He was a good king. Eventually, Heardred, Hygelac and Hygd's son, is stabbed in the back, basically, by some visitors, and he dies. So then after he dies, that's when Beowulf became the king of the Gates and ruled them for 50 years. In days to come, he contrived to avenge the fall of his prince. He befriended Egligs when Egligs was friendless, aiding his cause with weapons and warriors over the wide sea, sending him men. The feud was settled on a comfortless campaign when he killed Onelia. Eventually, Beowulf takes revenge on the people who killed Heardred, Hygelac, and Hygd's son. End flashback. Now we're back in the present where he is going to be fighting this dragon. And so the son of Ecgtheow, aka Beowulf, had survived every extreme, excelling himself in daring and in danger, until a day arrived when he had to come face to face with the dragon. The Lord of the Gates took 11 comrades and went in a rage to reconnoite. By then he had discovered the cause of the affliction being visited on the people. The precious cup had come to him from the hand of the finder, the one who had started all this strife, and was now added as a 13th to their number. Let's pause here. Beowulf, he has 11 warriors that are going to travel with him to the dragon's lair. They're not going to fight the dragon because Beowulf wants to do that alone, but they're there as like a little support system for him. We have 11 warriors. He is taking the thief with them because the thief is the only one who knows exactly where the dragon's lair is. So he has to take him with them to guide the way. So there are 12 of them going with Beowulf. Beowulf makes 13. Where have we seen 12 before in history? Jesus and the 12 disciples. You have the 12 disciples. You have Judas, one of the disciples who betrays Jesus, leads to his downfall. Just like the thief in Beowulf betrayed the nation by stealing that cup and letting the dragon loose on the nation. We have that parallel here. Biblical allusion. They press-ganged and compelled this poor creature to be their guide. Against his will, he led them to the earth vault he alone knew, an underground barrow near the sea billows and heaving waves, heaped inside with exquisite metalwork. The one who stood guard was dangerous and watchful, warden of that trove buried under earth. No easy bargain would be made in that place by any man. The veteran king sat down on the cliff top. He wished good luck to the Gates who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his coffered soul, part life from limb. Before long, the prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Beowulf, he's getting ready to fight this dragon, and it tells us there in line 2420, he was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his death. He senses his death. He knows that this is going to spell doom for him, and yet he's going to go through with this anyways. He has to fight this dragon. He can't help himself. We're going to skip this next paragraph. And the next three paragraphs, we're starting at line 2510. If you have my version, we're at the bottom of page 169. So line 2510, that starts with Beowulf spoke. Beowulf spoke, made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life often when I was young. Now I am old, but as king of the people I shall pursue this fight for the glory of winning, if the evil one will only abandon his earth fort and face me in the open. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time, those fighters in their helmets, resolute and high-born. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way to grapple with the dragon and make good my boast as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes. So I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate. Overseer of men decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against the sky-born foe. So Beowulf, he's like, look, I'm going to go. I'm going to fight this dragon. But yes, I am going to use weapons against it, unlike with Grendel. Men-at-arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armor, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle will bear your lord away. Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted in his own strength entirely and went under the crag. No coward path. Hard by the rock face that hale veteran, a good man who had gone repeatedly into combat and danger and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. Then he gave a shout. The Lord of the Gates unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger. Under gray stone his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Hate was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. There was a rumble underground. Down there in the barrow, Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield. The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and viciously turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by ancient right, was already in his hand. Roused to a fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. Unyielding, the lord of his people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swaddled in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing towards its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought, and fate denied him glory in battle. So the king of the gates raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment. Beowulf and the dragon, they're fighting each other. Beowulf heaves up his sword. He swings it at the dragon. But if we're thinking about dragons, they have like those really tough scales on the outside of them. And so it doesn't do anything to the dragon when he hits it with his sword. The mound keeper went into a spasm and spouted deadly flames. When he felt the stroke, battle fire billowed and spewed. Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Ecgtheow, it was no easy thing to have given ground like that and go unwillingly to inhabit another home in a place beyond. So every man must yield the leasehold of his days. So his sword fails him for the first time, and it doesn't look good for Beowulf. Before long, the fierce contenders clashed again. The horde guard took heart, inhaled and swelled up and got a new wind. He who had once ruled was furled in fire and had to face the worst. No help or backing was to be had then for his high-born comrades. That hand-picked troop broke ranks and ran for their lives to the safety of the wood. But within one heart sorrow welled up, and a man of worth, the claims of kinship cannot be denied. Beowulf's men that he brought there with him, they see that he's losing this fight against the dragon, and they run. Okay, they start taking off towards the woods. But there's one who is not faint of heart. One remains loyal to Beowulf. His name was Wiglaf. The name Wiglaf means war survivor. His name was Wiglaf, a son of Weostan's, a well-regarded Shilfing warrior related to Ealhare. When he saw his lord tormented by the heat of his scalding helmet, he remembered the bountiful gifts bestowed on him, how well he lived among the Wegmundings, the freehold he inherited from his father before him. He could not hold back. One hand brandished the yellow-timbered shield, the other drew his sword, an ancient blade that was said to belong to Aenmund, the son of Othere, the one Weostan had slain when he was in exile without friends. Wiglaf, he's like, I've got to help Beowulf out. So he takes out his sword. He picks up his shield. But look what kind of shield he has here. The yellow-timbered shield. He has a wooden shield. And he's about to charge in and try to help Beowulf with the fire-breathing dragon. And just his little wooden shield. That's loyalty there. We're going to skip the rest of that paragraph in the next two. So we're going to start with sad at heart. And this is going to be Wiglaf here giving a little pep talk to the rest of these men who are deserting Beowulf. Sad at heart, addressing his companions, Wiglaf spoke wise and fluent words. I remember that time when mead was flowing, how we pledged loyalty to our lord in the hall, promised our ring-giver we'd be worth our price, make good the gift of the war gear, those swords and helmets, as and when his need required it. He picked us out from the army deliberately, honored us and judged us fit for this action, made me these lavish gifts, and all because he considered us the best of his arms-bearing thanes. And now, although he wanted this challenge to be one he'd face by himself alone, the shepherd of our land, a man unequaled in the quest for glory and a name for daring, now the day has come when this lord we serve needs sound men to give him their support. Let us go to him, help our leader through the hot flame and dread of the fire. As God is my witness, I would rather my body were robed in the same burning blaze as my gold giver's body than to go back home bearing arms. Okay, so Wiglaf is just giving it to the men here. He's telling them how it is. How dare you? How dare you run away from your king, the king who has done nothing but support you and shower you with treasure over the years? He asked for your loyalty back in the day when you first became one of his thanes, his revered warriors. And you said sure, because you were sitting pretty in the mead halls, drinking your mead, listening to the songs being sung, being given treasure, okay, for your glorious conquests. And now, this is the first time our kingdom has ever face danger and you're running away? Wiglaf says, I would rather my body were robed in the same burning blaze as my gold giver's body than go back home bearing arms. Right? How dare you desert your king and not stand and fight with him when he faces danger? Okay, so Wiglaf seems like a good, loyal guy here. That is unthinkable unless we have first slain the foe and defended the life of the Prince of the Weather Gates. I well know the things he has done for us deserve better. Should he alone be left exposed to fall in battle, we must bond together, shield and helmet, mail shirt and sword. So he gives this great speech, this great pep talk, this dressing down to the other guys, and now Wiglaf's going to go help Beowulf. Unfortunately, speech doesn't really do anything. The rest of the guys are still like, yeah, we're going to go wait over here. We're not going to help Beowulf, which is very sad. Then he, Wiglaf, waded the dangerous smoke and went under arms to his lord, saying only, go on, dear Beowulf. Do everything you said you would when you were still young and vowed you would never let your name and fame be dimmed while you lived. Your deeds are famous, so stay resolute, my lord. Defend your life now, and with the whole of your strength, I shall stand by you. What a guy. Wiglaf goes in there. Beowulf's feeling defeated, and he gives him this pep talk. He's like, you can do this. You're Beowulf. I believe in you, right? I'm here now. Let's do this together. After those words, a wildness rose in the dragon again and drove it to attack, heaving up fire, hunting for enemies, the humans it loathed. Flames lapped the shield, charred it to the boss, and the body armor on the young warrior was useless to him. But Wiglaf did well under the wide rim Beowulf shared with him, once his own had shattered in sparks and ashes. The dragon starts attacking Wiglaf and Beowulf, and poor little Wiglaf's wooden shield burns to a crisp, it says, except for the boss. And the boss was like the center part, usually like a circle in the middle of a shield made of like iron, right? And so the dragon burns the entire shield away, except for that small center part. So Wiglaf jumps behind Beowulf's iron shield. Inspired again by the thought of glory, the war king threw his whole strength behind a sword strike and connected with the skull. And nagling snapped. If you're like, what's nagling? Nagling was the name of Beowulf's sword. Right? Swords that did well in battle, like Hrunting, like nagling, they were named. So nagling is the name of Beowulf's sword. But it snaps when he swings it at the dragon. Beowulf's ancient iron gray sword let him down in the fight. It was never his fortune to be helped in combat by the cutting edge of weapons made of iron. When he wielded a sword, no matter how blooded and hard-edged the blade, his hand was too strong. The stroke he dealt, I have heard, would ruin it. He could reap no advantage. Apparently Beowulf is too strong to use a sword, and when he uses it against the dragon again, it breaks in half. Then the bane of that people, the fire-breathing dragon, was mad to attack for a third time. When chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. So the dragon is able to get hold of Beowulf's neck and sinks its fangs into him. Next thing they say, the noble son of Weohstan saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He left the head alone, but his fighting hand was burned when he came to his kinsman's aid. He lunged at the enemy lower down so that his decorated sword sank into its belly and the flames grew weaker. Wiglaf is smart here. The dragon is covered in scales, and so he stabs the dragon in its belly, where it has softer skin. He manages to get through there. Once again, the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle. He struck it deep into the dragon's flank. Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound. So Beowulf then gets up the strength to take a knife and stab the dragon in its flank, which is its side. So who really kills the dragon? It says Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound, but are we giving too much credit here to Beowulf and not enough credit to Wiglaf for weakening it in the first place? I mean, I think so, but you decide. They had killed the enemy, courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. So every man should act to be at hand when needed. But now for the king, this would be the last of his many labors and triumphs in the world. Then the wound dealt by the ground burner earlier began to scald and swell. Beowulf discovered deadly poison separating inside him, surges of nausea. And so in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and struggled towards a seat on the wall. So when the dragon bit Beowulf in his neck, there was poison in that bite, and now it's like running through Beowulf's bloodstream and killing him. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns, and now that Thane, unequaled for goodness, with his own hands, washed his lord's wounds, swabbed the weary prince with water, bathed him clean, unbuckled his helmet. Wiglaf is taking care of Beowulf here as Beowulf is lying dying. Beowulf spoke in spite of his wounds, mortal wounds. He still spoke, for he well knew his days in the world had been lived out to the end. His allotted time was drawing to a close. Death was very near. This is Beowulf speaking now. Now is the time when I would have wanted to bestow this armor on my own son, had it been my fortune to have fathered an heir and live on in his flesh. What? We find out here that Beowulf does not have a son, no grandson. He never married. And yet this fool went and decided to fight a dragon, leaving no heir to his kingdom. Back then, if the king died and there was no person who was established to take over the throne, what's going to happen to that kingdom? It's going to fall into disarray. It's going to be attacked, right? And that's what's going to happen here. Beowulf left no heir, and he's lying here dying. That's very selfish, very prideful of him. For 50 years I ruled this nation. No king of any neighboring clan would dare face me with troops. None had the power to intimidate me. I took what came, cared for and stood by things in my keeping, never instigated quarrels, never swore to a lie. All this consoles me, doomed as I am and sickening for death, because of my right ways. The ruler of mankind need never blame me when the breath leaves my body for murder of kinsmen. Go now quickly, dearest Wiglaf, under the gray stone where the dragon is laid out, lost to his treasure. Hurry to feast your eyes on the hoard. Away you go. I want to examine that ancient gold, gaze my fill on those garnered jewels. My going will be easier for having seen the treasure, a less troubled letting go of the life and lordship I have long maintained. As Beowulf lays dying here, he reflects back on his life. Yes, he says he has no heir. What a fool. But he also reflects on what he has done well. And he says, you know what, overall, I was a good king. I cared for my people and kept them safe. I never started any quarrels, which means he never started wars with another nation. So he tried to be a peaceful king. He never told a lie. Okay. He never killed a family member. Burn, Unferth, right? Awkward. So he's reflecting back and he says, overall, I was a good king for the gates. And now, before he dies, he wants to see some of this treasure of the dragons. And so I have heard the son of Weohstan quickly obeyed the command of his languishing, war-weary lord. He went in his chainmail under the rock-piled roof of the barrow, exulting in his triumph, and saw beyond the seat a treasure trove of astonishing richness. Wall hangings that were a wonder to behold, glittering gold spread across the ground, the old dawn-scorching serpent's den packed with goblets and vessels from the past, tarnished and corroding. Rusty helmets, all eaten away, armbands everywhere, artfully wrought. How easily treasure buried in the ground, gold hidden, however skillfully, can escape from any man. Wiglaf goes down to look at this dragon's treasure, and yes, it is very intricate and beautiful, and you can tell it's expensive, but it's also rotting. Okay, it's rusting and corroding away. So Beowulf has died for this rotting treasure. And he saw too a standard, that's a banner, entirely of gold, hanging high over the hoard, a masterpiece of filigree. It glowed with light so he could make out the ground at his feet and inspect the valuables. Of the dragon there was no remaining sign. The sword had dispatched him. Then the story goes, a certain man plundered the hoard in that immemorial how, filled his arms with flagons and plates, anything he wanted, and took the standard also, most brilliant of banners. Wiglaf's looking over this treasure, deciding what to bring up to Beowulf, and the book does confirm to us that the dragon is indeed dead. And we'll stop there with this recording.